What led the Pope to mention Donald Trump? Could it have been a prophetic vision, a divine revelation, or a warning about the future? These questions lie at the heart of the investigation in this video, which examines the intriguing words of John Paul I during his final days of life. Some revelations have the power to challenge our deepest beliefs, especially when they occur in moments of profound silence and reflection during the last stages of one's earthly journey. The Pope's words resonated beyond the walls of the Vatican, carrying messages that continue to raise questions today. Imagine the Vatican, a symbol of tradition and spirituality, immersed in an atmosphere of solemnity. John Paul I, a leader of faith and resistance, spent his final days steadfast in his mission to guide humanity despite his weakened state. His reflections deepened, and surprisingly, an unexpected figure emerged in his thoughts: Donald Trump. John Paul I's final messages revolved around the gospel and divine mercy. He frequently mentioned the episode of Thomas, the disciple who doubted Christ's resurrection until he saw the marks of the nails. For the Pope, that story symbolized God's infinite patience and his willingness to provide proof of his grace, even in the face of doubt. Yet one of the most enigmatic aspects of his final words was the reference to Trump. At that time, the businessman was known solely for his achievements in the world of business and entertainment, with no direct involvement in politics. Still, something about his persona caught the pontiff's attention, leading both the faithful and scholars to interpret this mention in various ways. Some believe that John Paul I perceived traits in Trump that could significantly influence the global stage, while others argue that the Pope had a prophetic vision of the political events yet to come. This mention sparked debates, encouraging diverse analyses of the meaning behind those words. To better understand the context in which these statements were made, it is essential to look back at the global landscape of that era. Faith and politics have always intersected throughout history, and John Paul I possessed a keen insight into the role of leadership in the destiny of humanity. His emphasis on mercy and his reflections on contemporary figures revealed his concern for the future and the impact of human decisions in the moments leading up to his death. On the 2nd of April, 2005, John Paul I was deeply immersed in prayer and meditation. Even as he endured intense pain, his focus remained on humanity. His final messages, full of spiritual teachings, were only fully understood after his departure, consolidating a legacy that continues to inspire reflection within the Vatican. Surrounded by his closest aides, he devoted his last days to writing, leaving guidance and warnings for the world. Many of these records remained unpublished until after his death, revealing his concern for the moral and spiritual challenges of modern society. John Paul I's devotion was evident in every aspect of his life, but it became even more intense in his final moments. He saw suffering not as a burden, but as a means to connect more deeply with Christ. In his prayers, he asked for strength and wisdom, not for himself, but for those who would continue to lead the Church and face the challenges of the world. The Pope warned against the advance of secularism and moral relativism, which, in his view, threatened the spiritual foundation of humanity. In his final words, he stressed the need to trust in God's mercy and the importance of resisting the temptations of materialism. He called on the faithful to return to prayer, to take an active role in defending the faith, and to cultivate justice and kindness. Among his most impactful reflections, he anticipated a period of intense spiritual battle during which believers would need to demonstrate resilience. His final message was not merely a warning, but a call to hope even in the face of adversity. Divine mercy, he maintained, would be the path to true peace. John Paul I believed that with faith, prayer, and obedience to divine commandments, humanity would be capable of overcoming such trials. In his final moments, when he no longer had the strength to speak, he continued to pray in silence, reflecting on the redemption of the world and the strength needed for the faithful to resist temptation. In one of his final meditations, the Pope found comfort and inspiration in the Gospel of John, where the risen Christ appears to the apostles and shows them the marks of the nails on his hands. To him, that scene symbolized the very essence of divine love and mercy, an enduring teaching he wished to bequeath. This episode takes place 8 days after the resurrection, when Jesus appears to the disciples gathered in a closed room, gripped by fear and uncertainty. Thomas, who was absent during the first appearance, doubted the testimony of the other disciples and declared that he would only believe if he could see and touch Christ's wounds. When Jesus returns and invites him to touch his scars, Thomas abandons his unbelief and exclaims, "My Lord and my God." The significance of this account goes far beyond the event itself. It teaches that true faith does not rely on visible evidence, as reinforced by the second letter to the Corinthians, chapter 5, verse 7. "For we walk by faith, not by sight." For 3 years, the disciples were physically with Jesus, but the time came to learn to trust in his spiritual presence. Thomas's doubt reflects the quest for concrete evidence, a tendency that persists even today. Initially, Thomas demanded proof to believe in the resurrection. However, when Jesus invited him to touch his wounds, the need for evidence vanished. He recognized Christ's divinity without hesitation, while Jesus made it clear that ideal faith transcends what can be seen by stating, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." With these words, Christ blessed those who believe without requiring tangible signs, highlighting a deeper and more authentic faith. John Paul I saw in this lesson a fundamental principle for the modern church. For him, genuine faith was not based on physical evidence, but on absolute trust in God's mercy and love. Thomas's transformation symbolized the journey that all Christians should undertake, especially in an increasingly skeptical and uncertain world. His teaching was clear. The resurrection of Christ is the source of hope and redemption, even in the darkest moments. Reflecting on this passage from the Gospel, the Pope stressed the need for unwavering faith in a world marked by doubt. He acknowledged that Thomas's unbelief echoed contemporary uncertainties and reinforced the importance of a personal encounter with Christ, even without his physical presence. His message was a call to humanity to accept the redemption offered by the Gospel and to trust in the constant presence of Christ in their lives. The final words and thoughts of John Paul I became a lasting spiritual legacy, inspiring generations to strengthen their faith. Yet amid these profound reflections, an unexpected element emerged, a mention of Donald Trump. At the time of the Pope's death in 2005, Trump was widely recognized as a business magnate and television personality, still far from the political role he would later assume. However, among the Pope's observations were enigmatic references to him, suggesting that he would play an important role. These words by John Paul I regarding Trump were recorded in a vague yet meaningful manner. He mentioned the businessman within the context of future global events, insinuating that he would occupy a position of considerable influence. This posthumous revelation sparked debates and speculations. A spiritual leader of mercy mentioned Trump in his final reflections. What had he perceived in the businessman to justify such a mention? These questions remain open, inviting us to interpret the hidden meanings in the Pope's final words. To understand what led John Paul I to mention Donald Trump, it is essential to consider the role of prophecy and the responsibility of spiritual leaders in interpreting divine messages. Known for his deep spirituality and his ability to discern God's will, John Paul I conveyed reflections that went beyond the immediate. Thus, his references to Trump must be analyzed through the lens of spiritual discernment and prophetic vision in the Catholic tradition. Prophecy often reveals events that reflect divine designs and warnings. Therefore, the Pope's observations about Trump can be seen as an inspired vision, anticipating future events. John Paul I did not refer to Trump merely as an individual, but also to the potential impact his rise would have on the global stage. His reflections implied that Trump would play a role of great significance, influencing not only politics, but also cultural and spiritual aspects of society. He foresaw a period of significant transformation in which Trump's actions would serve as catalysts for both positive and challenging changes. This duality, common in prophetic messages, reflects the complexity of human free will and divine providence. After the Pope's death, Trump's ascent to the presidency of the United States confirmed the prediction of drastic changes. His administration had profound repercussions both nationally and on the global stage. To fully understand his role in history, it is necessary to undertake a balanced analysis that takes into account both his achievements and the controversies that marked his government. His supporters highlight advances such as the strengthening of national security, economic growth, and his defiant stance against the political establishment. Meanwhile, His critics emphasized the polarizing nature of his policies, his inflammatory rhetoric, and the ethical issues associated with his administration. From a prophetic standpoint, Trump's government can be seen as the fulfillment of John Paul I's predictions, bringing about profound changes and sparking fundamental debates. His decisions had repercussions across various spheres of society, provoking both progress and challenges. Whether one agrees or disagrees, it is undeniable that his figure helped shape the course of global events. Trump's presidency left an indelible mark on both American and international politics. The intense reactions to his actions underscored the need for deep reflection on moral and ethical values in politics. This aspect resonates with the prophetic visions of John Paul I, who stressed the duality of historical impacts and the importance of discernment in times of transformation. A fundamental element of his leadership was his relationship with religious communities. Trump managed to garner support from various groups who saw in his policies a defense of their principles and beliefs. This factor was likely taken into account by John Paul I in his visions, as he always emphasized the need to preserve spiritual values during challenging times. His call for mercy and love served as a guide, urging the faithful to maintain their belief and compassion regardless of circumstances. The Pope's message about divine mercy provides a prism through which one can examine the impact of Trump from a spiritual perspective. His mention of the businessman was not limited to the political sphere. It also served as a reminder of the need for moral and spiritual reflection. If you enjoyed this analysis, do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this.